Russell Wilson's still a member of the Seahawks, and Wilson says he hopes it stays that way, but the Wilson camp also making it known that if he's traded, he would only accept trades to 4 places: Dallas, New Orleans, Chicago, or Vegas. According to odds makers, the Raiders would be the favorite to trade for him, but the odds overwhelmingly say that he's going to take his first snap of the season for the Seahawks. minus 1,000 rather, you have to put down for the Seahawks. They went 12-4 last season, won the division, but lost to the rival Rams in the wild card round of the postseason. And there you see at the bottom, Wilson sacked a bunch once again this season. That's one of the reasons why he's reportedly unhappy with the way things are going in Seattle. So let's get the offseason outlook for the Seattle Seahawks. We have former Seahawk Brady Quinn with us, along with Pete Prisco. We're previewing 3 teams today, all 3 teams that Brady Quinn played for. So, Brady, I'll let you lead us off here. How do you think this Russell Wilson thing is going, and how will it be resolved?
You know, I think it's interesting how it's going, because this all came really more because of the agent who represents him, Mark Rodgers, who's really more well-known in the Major League Baseball realm. In fact, Russell Wilson's his only NFL client, and there's good reason for why a trade will never happen, in part because the Seattle Seahawks would be crazy, regardless of what offer they're given, to give up on a guy who's a franchise and generational talent as far as what he's been able to do so far in his career. The next thing is when you only represent one player in the NFL, you know, his agent isn't able to have conversations with other teams out of the blue and talking about some of his other clients where they may happen to ask about Russell Wilson. So that's one of the problems when you only represent one guy, is you're only technically allowed to talk to one team. So even that conversation, how that conversation would be spurred, it's hard to be able to orchestrate with an agent. So this is more of his agent basically kind of misstepping and acting like he's in the baseball world, and he's not. He's in the NFL world. You can't make these sort of comments. There's no possible way the Saints could even work out a trade, by the way, at their salary cap situation. And Drew Brees hasn't decided whether or not he's hanging him up. And then you look at the other 3 situations. Yeah, Vegas probably could swap. You know, they give him Derek Carr and some picks. But again, it's not going to happen because Seattle's never going to agree to that, because you'd have a drop-off from what Russell Wilson represents as a quarterback spot to Derek Carr. So, yeah, he's unhappy, and he's making his voice heard because they haven't invested the resources in protection like they should have, and they didn't listen to him last year when he said, look, we were throwing the ball earlier in games on early downs, and we were having success. We got away from it. I'm frustrated by it. You're not letting me do my thing and play to my strengths. That's not the direction that they wanted to go. It actually helped them start playing better defense and winning some games. But the truth of the matter is they do need to figure out how to make him happy, because he's going to be there for the long haul. And this team is capable of winning a Super Bowl with him as their quarterback.
It makes no sense whatsoever to trade Russell Wilson. 0. Because what's your best case scenario? Hope you fill the spot and come close to what he is. Build it around him. Supplement the offensive line. They've had all kinds of issues on the offensive line. Now, in fairness to that offensive line, he's responsible for about 10 or 11 of those sacks every year, because he holds the ball and he takes terrible sacks at times. I was watching Leonard Williams last week, and I watched the Giants game. He was awful in that game. He should burn that film and make sure the Seahawks never see it if he wants to get another contract extension down the road. But bottom line is, you don't get rid of Russell Wilson, because what do you do when you're creating a hole and you already have a star in that spot?
Seems like an easy fix, does it not? I mean, he's unhappy. He's your franchise guy. Make him happy.
Make him happy. He threw the ball early last year and he was an MVP candidate. Then they went back to doing what they want to do, which is run the ball and play defense. Well, the defense was awful early in the season. Yes, it got better. Did it get better because they ran the ball? No, guys got better. They improved. The bottom line is, you have to be able to throw the ball consistently in this league. You have to be able to dictate tempo. Pete Carroll's a great coach, but Pete needs to get with the times. It's not run the ball and play defense anymore. You realize that in 4 years when he was their quarterback early in Seattle, they were the #1 scoring defense in the league. The #1 scoring 4 years in a row. You know the last team to do that? The 50s Browns. They were a dynasty.
You remember that team, don't you?
Yeah, I do. I covered them.
He was alive for it, yeah.
That was before Brady was drafted by him. Moving on to team needs. Ryan Wilson has put together team needs for everybody. Brady, what do they need this offseason, whether it be free agency or in the draft?
Well, let's talk about the offensive line. At the very bottom of this list, you'll see interior offensive line. They need a center. They need a guard. They need to try to do all they can to solidify that group. I believe the entire right side is due up for free agency. But here's the reason why the interior is so important. When you have a quarterback who's 6 foot or sub 6 foot, that interior push makes it even harder for him to see downfield, which is already an issue in the first place. So you've got to be able to have a stout offensive line in the interior, and that's something that unfortunately just hasn't been the case over the course of his career in Seattle. So it starts there. And then what about the defense? Pete talked about some of the strides that they made. I'd try to sign back Shaq Griffin and KJ Wright if I can. Now, again, this is not the year to be a free agent and try to cash in big time. That might be the prerogative of Shaq Griffin, or maybe what KJ Wright's looking to do after a good season. But the truth of the matter is they'd be better off signing back on a more economical deal or a shorter term deal and revisiting this conversation a year from now. So here's some guys I'd like to see, but Shaq Barrett has to be a player that they potentially look at signing because they need help off the edge. Even though LJ Collier made strides, that's still the bread and butter of this Pete Carroll defense, is getting pressure with the front, not having to blitz a ton, and then playing coverage in the back end. So I think this list really kind of helps, raise all tides when you look at their struggles on offense and where they need to improve on defense.
Yeah, I'm with Brady on the interior of the offensive line. That's why I put Joe Thuney up there as one of my guys from the Patriots. I think he would make a lot of sense on the interior of their offensive line. And I think you can get Melvin Ingram and Bud Dupree on decent deals. Melvin Ingram coming off an injury-shortened season, didn't play that well, no sacks. Bud Dupree's coming off the injury. When he's healthy, he's a very good player. I think you might be able to get a good deal on those guys, and they need edge rushers. Brady mentioned the corners, too. Not only is Shaq Griffin an unrestricted free agent, so is Quentin Dunbar. And they have some other guys. They like DJ Reed, but they need corners. And so I think they ideally, you bring Griffin back and you keep him as your starting corner.
All right, how about looking forward? I know we have to wait for the draft and free agency, but early expectations for Seattle. I'm surprised that the odds makers are so down on them with the Rams now tabbed as the favorites by quite a bit in Vegas.
Well, it's not surprising. I mean, look, the Rams look to be one of the best teams, and then still when you look at their defense, Aaron Donald up front, Jalen Ramsey on the outside, and that's going to be a tough matchup for whatever the Seattle Seahawks do this offseason in free agency or the draft to try to go up against. But, no, they've got a chance because Russell Wilson is the quarterback. My biggest question is Shane Waldron now comes in as the offensive coordinator, and I think everyone's assuming that he's going to want to run the football because it's a Pete Carroll hire, and that's what Pete Carroll wants to do. But, off of that run, there's a lot of boots. There's a lot of play action. He comes from the Sean McVay system there with the LA Rams. So I actually think this system is going to be a perfect fit for Russell Wilson. I think he'll get along extremely well with Shane, and he will try to work to his strengths. And, if they do throw the football on early downs, it might be more play action. It might be more boots. It's not going to be a lot of the five-wide drop-back passing game where I think sometimes the Seattle Seahawks can get into trouble. So I'm pretty optimistic on the hire, and I also think it's going to bode well for the Seahawks. But there's no doubt they're a contender on the division when Russell Wilson's your quarterback.
Okay, but isn't it weird, though, Pete? I mean, when you looked at the Super Bowl odds, the 49ers have better odds to win the Super Bowl than the Seahawks. I know they were there a year removed.
And then they had all the injuries last year. So
but still, they've got I think it's going to be Jimmy G. We'll talk about the Niners another time. But Seattle, an underdog in the division now.
Well, and Brady mentioned it. They want to run the ball, and we know Shane Waldron will want to run the ball. Pete Carroll wants to run the ball. Who's going to run the ball? Chris Carson's an unrestricted free agent. They don't have much behind him. They have a bunch of young guys. So who's going to run the football if that's what you want to do? The strength of this team is Russell Wilson playing fast and loose and throwing to DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett and gang. That's the way I would play it. Get better on defense. You got better when you got Adams. You got better when you got Dunlap. Now continue to fortify the defense and let Russell Wilson cook.
Playoff team?
Yes.
Okay. When we move on, we'll move to another one of Brady Quinn's former teams. The team that drafted him, the Cleveland Browns, who finally have a franchise quarterback, a playoff appearance, and a playoff win. What do they need to do this offseason to take another step toward the Super Bowl?